Welcome back to Drafting with Mark, and in this video we're going to take a look at creating this part using Inventor. Now, in the other two videos I've done earlier, I've created this using strictly 2D tools, and I've also created this in a 3D. So I'll remember to link that at the end of this video if that's something that you're interested in watching me do. But for now, we're going to go ahead and jump over to Inventor and get started on this one. Also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something a little different in this one. I'm going to use parameters. And if you've never used parameters before, that will make your life easier, especially when it comes to modifying things. So parameters is super useful if you're going to have to do any kind of editing, and it can do it rather quickly. All right, so let's jump over to Inventor and get started on that. Alright, so once you go to Inventor and you do the normal startup, you're going to either be faced with this icon, and if you don't have this dialog box, instead of icon, if you don't have this dialog box, go ahead and select the new tab here. And once you select that, it should open up this box. Now what I'm going to use is going to be the US English one, and I'm going to be creating this part using a metric, right? So I'm going to use a metric, standard millimeter IPT. If you selected the English and you have it set to inches, you can also change that in Inventor, right? But for now, we already know that we're going to use the millimeter, and I will show you how to change that once we go ahead and get started. All right, so I'm going to choose metric, then I'm going to click on the standard millimeter IPT, and then start creating. And this is where, depending on how fast or how long ago since you used Inventor, it may open up slow or it may open up fast. All right. So here's the Inventor user interface. You should know that you're ready to go because your ribbon should change, and you should have your typical commands that you're going to use, as well as to start the 2D sketch. But for some strange reason, if you put inches in, and you're not going to see that until you actually start creating some parts. The way you would change that is underneath the Manage tab here. So once you click on that one, and I'm giving it a second to jump over, and I always get them mixed up. It's not the Manage one. It's actually the Tools one. So the one next to it. And then you're going to go to the Document Settings. And then you'll choose Units. And then here's where your units are. So if you didn't want to choose inches, you can change it here and choose millimeters or however you want to look at it. And then you can also control how do you want your dimensions displayed, right? You can either control them by the values or things of that nature. All right. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And then we're going to go back to the 3D modeling tab here. And before I get started, I will set up some parameters already for my drawing to do. So I'm going to select the F of X command here. And then that's just stands for parameters. It's going to open a dialog box. And if I've had some dimensions on here already, you will see them in the dimensions underneath this model parameters. But for what we're going to do, we're going to add some numerical values. I can also change some if I have some true or false statements, or I want to add some text, right? So you get these three options of how you want to control things. I'm going to go with a numerical value. And I want to tell this one that it's going to be the total length. Now, one standard practice here to do is to use, just shorthand form. Try not to type in the whole words. And another thing is also try not to leave any spaces or wow characters like a $sign or something of that nature. Just kind of keep your names really simple. Next, I'm going to click over here, and I just clicked in this icon here, or this dialog box, and then I'll give it the length. The total length of my part here will be 120, right? So that's going to be my total length going the width-wise, right? And I can tell it another one, giving a total height. So let's do that. Let's go TOT_HT. And then for my drawing, we do see that the total height of this is going to be 125, right? So I have these two numbers already set up without actually doing anything, and I'm just hitting enter after it. So we can already control how we want our stuff to do. You can also select this little icon here, and if you had something that was different, you'll get a unit dialog box here, and so you'll have other different options of things that you can control, right? So if it's a length, or maybe it's an angle or something of that nature, you can put it in degrees, radians, or some of that nature. So you can control the units as well. Let's go ahead and close this. And then we can go ahead and I'm trying to think, is there any other ones that I need as I'm kind of going through this. All right. If I want to, I can add a couple of those arrays and things of that nature in here as well. Well, not really arrays, diameters. So if I go to the add numeric, and then if I tell it that I want the, and I'm trying to give a good name for it. Let's call it a small radius. So small rad. And that's going to be 20, right? So that's going to be my small radius, and I think I only have one major dimension on this drawing. So I'll go back to add numerical, just call it DIA, and my diameter here, and that's for all of these little circles. Let's call it 15. And I think I do have a couple of arcs and things of that nature, but I'm going to let the drawing kind of dictate the rest of them, right? So you should get kind of the idea of how it is to create some of these, right? So I'm going to use these as I'm building my drawing. Let's go ahead and hit done on this. I'll go ahead and start the sketch here. And then I'm going to select this icon here, the XY plane. Once I select that, I'll go to my circle here, and I'm going to create a radius circle first. So I'm going to click somewhere. And then I'm going to start previewing my circle, and depending on what you've used last, it's going to either give you a diameter or a radius. Right now mine is doing a diameter circle. You can see that because it's going totally across my circle. So do a right click, and then I can choose radius. And you can see the difference now that that dotted line is only going from the center to any edge on my circle here. Now the length of that is my small radius, right? Remember I created one that was called small radius. So I'm just going to type in SM underscore RAD. And you can see that it's not red anymore. If it does create that and keep that parameter and it turns black, that means that it can find that. So once I hit enter, by default, it should put that small radius there. Let's go back to my parameters and see what I've labeled that as. So my small radius was set to 1. That needs to be set to 15. So when I type in 15 and hit enter here, you're going to see that it automatically adjust my circle that I use with that parameter in it. Likewise with my small diameter, that is 15. So if I hit done here, I go back to circle. I'm going to click here. Remember I want to create a diameter circle, so I'll do a right click. I'll choose diameter, and then I'm going to type in DIA and hit enter. Okay, let's go ahead and move this over. I'm going to draw a line going right from this center, going this direction. All right, the total length of this line is going to be my total, right? So I'm going to go to a dimension. I'm going to place it here, and then I'll click here. Once I'm editing my dimension, I don't know that. If I don't know what that is, I can also click this little flyout and then tell it to give me a list of parameters. And I hope you can see this. Let's bring it up a little bit. And then I can say, hey, which one of these is it? So if I know that I created that with the total length parameter, I can check it here. So I don't have to necessarily remember which one I use. All right. So I have this line and it's that distance. I want to do one other thing here. I'm going to center this amongst this center point here. So I'll go back to the dimension command. I'm going to select here, and then I'll pick at this diameter, and I'll click here. I'm just going to select this function here and divide it by 2. So what's going to happen now is if I change this number, if I ever have to change this number, it will automatically adjust this number. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and kind of use a pattern to create this circle here. Let's go to the pattern command, and I'm going to use the rectangular one. I'll select the geometry, which is this circle here on the inside. Next, I need to choose the direction, so I'll select direction, the arrow there, and then I'm going to select this line. Now this is giving me which way I want to go. Right? I know that I have, 4 of these? And I know the distance in between them should be set to 40. I'm going to go ahead and OK this. And then we're going to go back and take a look at our parameters and see if there's any way we can kind of put a little bit of intelligence into this. So I'm going to go up here to my function. And you can see here that I have 4 units, right? And then I have the distance between them. So all I'm saying is that I should be able to take this number here and divide it by this number, my total length, right? And that should give me, ideally, this one, right? That's telling me the space in between them. It's not going to give me 4, but it's going to give me whatever that number is minus 1. And it will create that. All right. So let's go ahead and see if we can make some kind of function to basically automate this into giving me that. So I'm going to select here where it gives me that gap in between here. And I'm going to tell it that I need this to be the total length right? And then this needs to be divided by this number here. So I'm going to type in whatever D4 is because that's the value that I put in. And I hope that it doesn't create a circular one. And then I'm going to minus a number of 1 from it, right? I'm going to go ahead and put these in parentheses because I want the D1 and this one, sorry, the D4, and this one to happen before anything else. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And let's hit close on this. And then we're going to test it and see if this works. All right, so let's do one simple check on this. We're going to adjust this 120 number and see if it does indeed keep a distance that is equal through all of this. So let's go back to my function. And then let's go ahead and make it twice as long by making it 240. And once I hit enter, you should see that number should go to 80. And this line does increase, and it does keep that number in between each and every one of those. So it does work, right? I'm going to go ahead and put this back and set it to 120. And then I'll go ahead and continue on with the rest of my drawing, right? So I'm just kind of showing you some neat things that you can do with parameters. I don't think I'm going to make this whole entire drawing out of parameters, but I just wanted you to be aware of them. All right, so let's go to hit done. Let's go ahead and create a circle here. Click here. It needs to be a radius circle. So right now I'm going to do a right click and choose radius. I'll click here, and then I want to put a dimension on it. So I'll go to dimension, select here, and I'm looking for a radius dimension. Right now it's giving me a diameter dimension. I'll do a right click on here and tell it dimension type and choose radius. And when I place this dimension, it's going to ask me, hey, you need to give me a number, but I want it to be the same value as this one. So I like to keep everything as consistent as possible. That way, when I'm ready to edit any of this, I can edit them using the parameters, and I can make life so much simpler for me. So for example, if both of these need to change to 30, I'm only changing one number. All right, let's go ahead and finish a few more stuff here. I'm going to draw a line going straight across here. And then we're going to create a line going right across the top. I'm going to go ahead and link these two to each other by clicking a tangent on these. So I'll go to tangent, which is located here. Select that circle and then that line there. I'll tangent also on the other end, that circle and that line. And if it does give you this, that just means that this is a horizontal line, which I'm okay with. So I hit cancel on that. And let's go ahead and tangent these at the bottom. Go ahead and escape out of this and then go ahead and trim off the extra portions of your shape. Now we could have also created this with a slot command, right? I'm going to go ahead and select this center line here and go ahead and make it a construction line. Okay, so next what we have to do is we're going to start building on creating the slot that's located up here at the top. Now this is where Inventor does have an advantage over AutoCAD, because if you go to the rectangle drop down, you'll see that we do have some slot options already available to us. So the one that I'm going to choose here is going to be this 3-point one here. I don't actually know where the center is, but I can switch back to the drawing and do a little calculation of where it's at. But it's going to be easier for me just to do a different calculation. So I'm going to go ahead and select this 3-point. I'm going to click here. Let's see, somewhere along here. And I kind of got to get it somewhere in the middle here, right? And then I'm just going to kind of blow it up that way. All right, so I'm going to start locating where my centers are. I'll go back to the dimension. I know that from this center point to that end point here has to be 5. I know from this end point, so I'm just clicking that end point to this end point, has a distance of 65. Now, don't get me wrong, it's going to start looking a little balloony, but we can kind of finalize some of this stuff. If I go ahead and put this radius dimension on here and set it equal to 20, that should start shrinking some of this down a little bit. Let's go ahead and put a dimension from that center to this one. This one has a distance of 52.5. And then let's put one more dimension from here to here. That dimension is 37.5. All right. Now we have to figure out what this radius is, right? So we have to figure out how or what that radius is, and I'm going to jump back to the drawing so we can kind of figure that out together. Okay, so when it comes to figuring out this radius here, what we need to do is, let me go ahead and pull up some of my drawing tools here. What I need to do is I need to go ahead and kind of figure out, and what I'm trying to figure out is this arc here, right? We know that this is sitting at 55, right? And these are just numbers that we know right off the top here. We know the distance from this center to here. And that number should be 20. Where I come up with 20 is a radius, right? So all the radius is telling me from the center of this to any point has to be at 20, right? This is at 55. Now, if you don't know whether to subtract this number or add this number to this one, if you kind of take a look at this, it's kind of growing as it's going up, right? It starts at 55, then it goes to 62.5, which is located at this one. And then the other side here, we're getting at 87, and we're getting at 95. So that just tells me that I need to add this number to this one. So I'll get 55 plus 20. So in that case, the number that I'm going to need for that radius should be sitting at 75, right? All right, so let's go ahead and jump back to that, and then we're going to put our radius at 75. Okay, so let's go ahead and put a dimension on this and make it 75. And there we go. And once I do that, you're going to see that everything should take the right form, right? Now this is going to make creating our next one super simple because we have all of our numbers. The only thing we need to do is account for the different radius. So I'm going to use the exact same command here, this 3-point slot. I have where it starts, so I'm going to click that endpoint. I know where it ends. I'm going to click that endpoint. And then I also know the arc of it. So I'm going to click right on this arc. And now it's asking me for the radius. I'll go ahead and type in the radius, which is going to be 12.5. And then that one is actually created for us rather quickly. Next, let's go ahead and draw a couple of vertical lines here. So I'm going to go a line here. And then I'm going to escape out of that and create one more line here. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use that same thing I did before. I'm going to tangent to this one. I'll tangent to this one. Then I'll switch over to coincidence and tell it coincidence to this line here. Coincident that endpoint to this line here. Come to trim. And then I'm just going to start trimming this stuff off. Trim right in between there. All right, let's escape out of this. We got one more thing we need to do. Let's go ahead and put our fillet that's located between here. So if I go to fillet, let's see here, give it a radius of 20. Just going to click those two lines and then these two lines, right? And that should be all we need for this whole drawing here. Everything looks to be correct. I'm just going to go to finish sketch. Zoom out a little bit. Then let's take a look at putting an extrusion on this. Now it's asking me what solid or what profile do I want to select. Remember that I have many different profiles on here. Like on the inside of this is a profile. This is a profile. Between each one of these circles here is a profile. So Inventor right now is asking me what profile do I want to extrude. So I'm going to select this one here because that's going to be the one I'm going to need. Then I'm going to give it the thickness that it's going to need, which in our case is going to be 30. And then I'm just going to tell it to split it. And go ahead and hit OK. All right. We still have this in an isometric look. And this should look exactly like what we created when we drew it in 2D in AutoCAD. Also, when we did the 3D and in AutoCAD as well. So you can see that this created that same shape. Now at this point, we're actually done with all of the 3D modeling in Inventor for this part. So I'm just going to jump over to the drafting part. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to get a little bit proactive by saving my part, right? I'm just going to click the save option here because it's going to ask me to do this one way or another when I get to doing this in Inventor. When I get to doing the drawing part. So what I'm going to do here, let's go ahead and name this, and we can leave it as part 2. I'm just looking here and I don't have one that's called part 2. I'll go ahead and hit save on that. And then we're going to jump over to drafting, right? I'm going to click on the same new icon that I usually do. I'm going to scroll down to here. And now we have 2 different types of drawings. We can either choose an AutoCAD template or we can use the Inventor templates. What I like to do is use an Inventor template. Go ahead and hit the create button. And then we're going to give it a little bit of time to cook. And it's going to probably come in as a D-size drawing. We don't necessarily want it as a D-size drawing. We're going to create it as a B-size drawing, right? All right. So like I was saying, this is the D size. And if I zoom into that, you're going to see that that does say D size. I want this to be a B size. So I'm going to select sheet 1. I'll do a right click on it. Go to edit sheet. Change this to B size. Hit OK. Now let's shrink to a B size. You can see that it did update in my title block. Then I'm going to go ahead and delete this out of my title block. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is start bringing in my views. So I'll go to base. And it should bring it in my part just as that front view. We can adjust that if we want to. Let's see if we can make it just a slightly bit bigger. Yeah, that looks perfect. Okay. So I have it set to a 1:1. I'm going to hit OK on this. We're going to go to project geometry off of this. I'll select this view, create one here, and then put the isometric located here. Right click and do a create. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and put my center marks on. So I'll switch over to the annotate tab. I'm going to select the center marks, and remember that this is for circles and arcs. I'm going to select this arc here and then this one. I should go ahead and select each one of these in between. Do a right click and tell it to OK that. And then I'm going to put in these center lines. So I'll go to center line here, click on here to here, and then do a right click and hit create. Go back to that. So I'm selecting here to here, right click create. Select this endpoint to that one, right click and create. All right, so we do have all of our lines there. Next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and put my center lines that are located along here and here. Now this is one of those things where I do wish that Inventor would have a way to kind of put an arc one here between here. I can try using a bisecting one, but I think it extends it a little bit past it. But I think in our case that might be okay. Let me see if I can shorten it. And that's what I always hated about it, is that it doesn't allow me to shorten that. Okay, but that's good enough for what we need. And I also don't like the way these kind of looking. Let's go ahead and delete those. And the way I'm going to fix that is by selecting this center mark and put it on this arc on the inside. And this one. We can adjust these by kind of pulling these. So this is some of that stuff that you're going to have to kind of play with it in Inventor to kind of make it look a little bit like how you want it to look. All right. Let's kind of move this up a little bit so we got enough room to put our dimensions. All right. Now we'll start dimensioning this. And unlike with AutoCAD, just go ahead and start dimensioning your drawings and don't worry about the style here in the beginning. We can also do that later. So I'm just kind of creating all of the dimensions that I'm going to need. One other neat thing that we can do is that if I adjust this, all of my dimensions should adjust with it, right? So I'll go ahead and put that dimension here. And let's see, we do have a dimension between here and this line here. And this is one of those things that works kind of backwards from AutoCAD does. AutoCAD will put your dimension on the side where you end your dimension at, whereas Inventor, it's going to put it on where you start your dimension, meaning that if I click this point first, it's going to put my dimension on the right side, on the left side. And then if I select this one, so I'm expecting my dimension to pop out on the left side. Let's go ahead and select these two lines here. And it looks like I may have missed something there because my dimension is off. And I'll come back to that here in a second. Let's go ahead and finish dimensioning. So we have a dimension going here. And I'm just kind of flying along through my dimensions. If you have some of your dimensions where every time you're clicking them and the dialog box appears, I'm just going to double click this one, for example, just to edit this. The reason why yours is doing that is because you have this box here checked, right? So I try not to check that when I'm just putting all of my dimensions on, and then I'll come back and edit my dimensions later by doing that. That just kind of slows me down. So I'll kind of finish doing this. And let's see. We do have a few radial dimensions in here. And I'm trying to think, is there any other dimensions that I'm going to need? I know I have a dimension up here. One that goes from this line to this one. And then we have a dimension also going from here to that point. All right. Looks like everything is correct except for this one, and I'm going to go back and see why this dimension is not correct. And for some strange reason, it looks like this circle here was not located in the right place, or the center mark was. So I'm going to go ahead and delete some of these and kind of verify that. Let's go ahead and put a center mark on this arc again. I'm going to escape out of that, and I'm going to stretch this out. And let's take a look and see what that dimension is. So I'll put a dimension now from that center line to this one. Okay. And that does give me the 65 that I was looking for. Right? So a little bit of other stuff we can do here is I can double click on the inside of this one. I'll go ahead and change it to shaded with visible edges. So that'll change kind of the look of this one. And then I'll go ahead and start adjusting my dimensions. So we're going to go to the Manage tab. Then we're going to click on our Style Editor. And by default, it should automatically adjust our default dimensions for us. So I'm just waiting on the dialog box to appear. So once this appears, you see that it has the default millimeter already selected for us. So let's go ahead and start adjusting this. We don't want to see those trailing zeros, so I'm just going to go ahead and uncheck that. We don't have any alternate units. Let's go ahead and take a look at our display. So how do we want it to look? So all of our arrowheads and gaps and all of that stuff, this is kind of normal. Let's go ahead and take a look at our text. So if I wanted to adjust any of that stuff, this is where I would change these. So I'm going to make all of my dimensions horizontal. That's what I'm adjusting here. If I have any tolerancing, and on this one I don't have any tolerancing options. Any other in this option. So if I wanted to change some, for example, my radius dimensions to look a little differently, I can do that here. And I think everything that I'm looking at here should be fine. And then my notes, right? Let's go ahead and hit save and close. And all of our dimensions should adjust rather quickly. And some strange reason, look like I may have lost a dimension. Let's go ahead and come back here. All right. Okay. Last thing we need to do is just go ahead and put some other stuff on here, right? So I can double click on this one, and I want this to be a reference dimension. So I'll go to my precision and tolerancing, and I'll tell it that this is a reference dimension. Likewise with this one. So I'm just double clicking on these, and I'll go to reference. And then for my other ones, I know that these have like 2x in front of them, so I can double click on here. I'll click back on the text tab, and then I'll just hit the home button, and then you can type in 2x. put my cap lock on and give a space between it. And I can kind of finish that going around the whole entire drawing, right? So just 2x. And I know I'm giving myself a space between here. So I'm just kind of double clicking them, and I will hit the home button on this one, 2x space. Double click that one. I have a home, 2x space. And then finally with this one, this is a, well, I got the same dimension, don't I? Let's go ahead and delete that one. Let's go back to the dimension command and select this whole. And this I have 4 of them, right? So I can double click on this one, hit the home button and say 4x. All right. All right, so that looks like that's about everything that I need for this drawing. So hopefully you enjoyed this one, and stay tuned. Like I said, I'm going to come up with something a little bit creative here next week, especially as it relates to doing 2D drafting. So if that's stuff that you like to see, I'm going to do some 2D stuff where I kind of break down the 3 different ways of doing title blocks again. I know every now and then I got to come back and remember, because I'm kind of all over the place on those 3 videos. So be prepared. That should be a nice long video for you 2D AutoCAD users, and look forward to that next week. So thank you for hanging with me this long. And once again, I appreciate all the ones that have recently subscribed. Thank you. You guys are helping me motivate. And to everybody that's still tuning in and my loyal subscribers, thank you as well. All right. I'll see you in the next video.